doing the lectures or the class easily, even though the students don't have to come to the class because of this pandemic. It is true that technology can help us transfer the information. There is no doubt that technology can help us to transfer knowledge to the students. But can technology transfer feeling of togetherness to our students? Can technology transfer also the feeling of unity between lecturer and students? That's one thing that we have to think about. So, ladies and gentlemen, I try to make a study to give recommendation on how we can conduct the lecture process in this pandemic, but without losing our little relationship. So let's okay. Let's skip to the next slide. So this is what we do in this study. There are 5 steps that we do in this study. The first step is problem formulation, to know the problem faced by students, educators, parents, and in the online learning. And second step is to study past research related to the topics. The third step is evaluation, how to evaluate the extent of the role technology in existing the online learning process, the extent to which the effectiveness of the use of technology. And the next phase is analysis, where we analyze the stability between educational goals and the technology devices used in online learning. And the last steps is provide recommendations on how to properly apply technology in online learning to further optimize results and avoid negative impacts. So because of time limitation, let me skip to the model that we propose. Yeah, next. As before, backward. Stop. Okay. I have one more question. Does information technology really have negative impact on the online learning process? The question that I have given in the early speech just now is shows that technology have an important role to help us to do the online learning. Because of the use of technology, sometimes we have problems because some people that technology have negative impact. But does information technology really have a negative impact on the online learning process? That's what we have to consider. Next. The occurrence of cybercrimes, student irregularities and delinquency, information overload, dependence, apathy, plagiarism, technology addiction, laziness of loss of learning independence. These are the problems that come up in the learning process, in online learning process. Are more caused by use of technology in education, which has occurred long before. So the problem caused by the use of technology is do not happen not only during the pandemic, but before, long before the pandemic. These problems are not actually caused by the use of technology, but because of human behavior who uses the technology. So when we feel that we talk to ourselves when we do online learning, it's not because of the technology. Yeah. When students when the students put off his camera, yeah, let the cameras off. So actually he do not attend the class. It is not because of the technology, but it is because of the behavior of the students. So actually we cannot put the blame on the technology. Yeah, the problem is the behavior of the person who uses the technology, yeah, including cybercrime. Yes, it is true that cybercrime happen because of technology, but it is not. We cannot put the blame the technology on the cybercrime. Yeah, the one that is responsible in the cybercrime is the people who use the technology. Okay, next slide. Okay, let us consider the law of education in Indonesia. Law number 20 of 2003, Article 3, stated that national education functions to develop capabilities and shape the character of civilization of unified nation in the context of educating the nation life, aiming to develop the potential of students to become human beings who believe in God Almighty, have noble character, knowledgeable, healthy, capable, creative, independent, and become a democratic and responsibility citizen. Okay, next slide. So this figure shows how national education that we have in Indonesia put two main factors: iman factor and knowledge factor. There are three objectives on the education in the iman factor. There is iman itself, takwa, and noble character or good character. While the second factor, that is knowledge factor, includes knowledge, health, creativity, independence, democratic, and responsible. So I group this objective of national education into groups because the iman factor is something related to the heart, while the knowledge factor is something related to brain or reasoning. So national education put these two factors as a unity. So it means that national education have to include both factor, iman factor and knowledge factor. So, okay, next slide. Based on the division of the national education goal groups, the use of technology must be carried out by considering the characteristics of each these groups. So the use of technology must be based on these two groups or two factors, iman or ilmu, iman or knowledge. Yeah, because technology cannot cover all of these factors. Yeah, there are some factors that can use the technology, but some other factors cannot use technology. Information technology should be used only for ease of communication and provision of materials. Yeah, technology can be used only for transfer of knowledge. Yeah, but technology cannot transfer feel of togetherness. Technology cannot transfer care to our students. Yeah, what do you feel when the students have problems in their subjects, but they cannot come to the lectures because of long distance? So what the student needs when they have problems is care, responsibility. And sometimes technology cannot transfer responsibility. Yeah, technology can transfer knowledge, but cannot transfer responsibility, cannot transfer care, then it cannot transfer love, then etc. And information technology is more suitable to fulfill the knowledge aspect, but cannot fulfill the faith aspect. Okay, next. So this is the model that we have proposed. Yeah, we recommend to do the online learning process. So we divide the model into two groups, two area, offline learning and offline learning area and online learning area. So the online learning area is the yellow circle, and the offline area is the white part of the model. So this means that online learning must be in the area of offline learning. And the blue circle represents subjects. And the blue circles represent subject. The number of subject depends on the number of the subject that is given in each semester. So this model means that every subject can be taught by online learning and offline learning. But we have to consider what can be do by learning process and what process that can be done by offline process, because the difference of the content. Yeah, for example, we can see in the picture the activity that can be done by online learning is like presentation, seminar, lecture, content sharing, and discussion. This can be done by online learning. But because this online learning is in the area of offline learning, it means that this can also be done offline. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily online, but can be done by offline learning also. Meanwhile, the activity like lab activity or practicum, workshop, character building, group game, and academic supervising is in the area of offline learning. It means that these activities cannot be done online. So when the subjects have to practice, the students have to practice. So the practice will have to be done by offline learning. Yeah, so the students have to come to class or to laboratory. Yeah, workshop also, because in workshop there is discussion, ask and question, yeah, and also relationship.
Dr. Gunadi, you only have 4 minutes more.
Okay, thank you. Also in the group game and also in academic supervising, as I mentioned before. So as a conclusion, technology is safe. Yeah, so there is no problem. There's no problem with the use of technology in online learning, but we have to organize. So in this study, it can be concluded that technology is needed to facilitate the implementation of learning and teaching, but must be managed properly. Technology is just a tool that, if used properly by the right person, by the right people, we will have a positive impact. But if it is not managed properly and in the wrong hands, technology will have a negative impact. Hence, the problem is not the technology, but how to build human character. However, technology will always deal with some people with bad character. So, the focus of using technology is how to maintain security and prevent the learning process from actions that are not commendable. Thus, the online learning process needs to be maintained, combined with online learning and appropriate materials and activities. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic on on the learning process is the loss of social interaction between educators and students, which can also result in the loss of character values from the students. That's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gunadi, for the interesting and insightful techno-religious talk. Again, the problem lies in human being, the adab, the akhlaq, not the technology, right? Okay, now I open the floor for questions. We have 5 minutes for Dr. Gunadi to address your question. Please post your question on the chat box, or if you are there, you can ask him directly.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Sali Amna. I'm from University of Putra Indonesia, YPTK. Good morning, sir. In my experience of teaching during the online learning, the biggest problem I found is to keep my students dishonesty. So when we give the students online tests, somehow they usually end up with almost the same answers. Maybe there's a generous students, a smart students, capture the screen and share it to WhatsApp group, and the other students just copy the whole answers. And it happened again and again. So would you like to give some suggestion on how to keep the students' honesty on online assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the kind question. So the problem in examination is we cannot guarantee whether the answer from the students is based on his thought by himself or it is from other sources. Maybe it comes from his friends or yeah. In general, there is no guarantee in honesty. Yeah, we cannot guarantee that students have honesty in the exam. That's the problem in the online process. That's the part of the problem that we discussed before. So one of the impact of the online learning is that, especially in exam, especially in examination, we cannot guarantee that the answer that the student answer the question by himself or by themselves. So actually, technology has proposed some solution. Yeah, for example, if I'm not mistaken, in Google Classroom, yeah, or some other application, there are facilities for teachers to control the honesty of the the the, the student's answer. Yeah. But again, there is still limitation. So what I suggest is, when we have examination, it must be conducted offline. Yeah, in my opinion, examination is one example, one activity that must be carried out in the area of offline, like I show you in the model. Yeah, so beside the practicum, discussion, or game, examination can be included in the activities that must be carried out by offline. So yeah, because of the limitation of technology. Yeah, otherwise we have new technology that can guarantee the honesty of the students. That's my my apa ini opinion ya. Okay. Any other question?
Okay, there is one more question from this chat box by Aditya Ajit from UPI YPTK Padang. His question is, how do you handle the mischief student during the lesson, and how impactful is your manner to cope it? Pelajar nakal.
How do you handle?
Mischief, pelajar nakal. Mischief student.
How can we handle mistake?
No, mischief. Mischief student.
Misfit.
Mischief, pelajar-pelajar yang nakal.
Oh. Pelajar nakal.
Yeah, online.
We cannot handle pelajar nakal online. We must handle it offline.
So meaning that you have to call that student to see you personally.
Because we need relationship. We need care. We need love in the caring of problem students.
Iyo, ada orang lain. Yo.
We cannot do it. We cannot do that online.
Okay. Not everything can be done online.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Pak Gunadi.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Gunadi, for your presentation.
Mas.
Kau nyentuh kau pakai?
Ciu.
Thank you very much.
Karena mau
Itu penelitian patang.
sama siapa tadi? Hah? Siapa tu?
Okay. Our third
Barang
keynote
banyak,
speaker for today
Hah?
is Associate Dr. Asad Wakar Malik
Iyo.
from National
Ah,
University
mana
of Sciences and Technology, NUSE, Islamabad, Pakistan. Let me read Dr. Asad's biography.
Tuang tempat sang
Dr. Asad Wakar Malik is an associate professor and also the software engineering department head of department. The software engineering department head at the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, NUSE, Islamabad, Pakistan.
Iyo. Kan
Dr. Asad obtained his Master of Science in the year 2005 from National University from NUSE, Islamabad, Pakistan, and his PhD in the year of 2012 from Georgia Institute of Technology, Atlanta, Georgia, USA. He is a dedicated researcher, academician with more than 8 years of professional experience, extensively worked to achieve environmental sustainability with a focus on energy resource utilization. Mainly, he explored on data gathering in smart farming using sensors and UAV for better yield production, resource sharing in smart cities to enhance network sustainability and quality of services, and also adoption of autonomous connected vehicles to provide low latency computation and to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Okay, most of the developed work in the form of simulation and framework is available on GitHub and online for the research community. Dr. Asad will present his talk on global impact of COVID-19 pandemic and technological challenges. The stage is yours, Dr. Asad.
Thank you, Dr. Salima. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, very well.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and hi everyone. I hope you guys are doing good during this pandemic. So can you share my slides?
Organizer, please share his slide.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so as Dr. Salima introduced me, she has actually explained everything about my career and my achievements so far. So before I start my presentation, I would like to share my research area, and that is distributed simulations, right? So most of my work is like smart farming, data gathering, UAVs, and smart cities sustainability is actually based on the simulations. And simulation is actually a field which is actually easily merged with any other field, right? So if you talk about the machine learning, AI, intelligent systems, you talk about the UAVs, you talk about the IoTs, vehicular systems, so it can easily merge with every kind of field, right? So because what simulations required is actually the data, and data is coming from the either from the IoT sensors or from intelligent decision making systems or from smart sustainable cities, and based on that you can actually use it in your simulation, and then you can forecast or make some certain decisions or make some well-informed decision in fact. Right, so the global impact, so the title of my thesis is Global Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic and Technological Challenges, right? So the reason I'm sharing with this my area about before entering into my presentation is like because of the distributed simulation nature, we can also play our part in the improvement of the society, right? So the most of us are somehow familiar with the global impact of the COVID-19, right? But on the part of the simulations, how we can play our part for the sustainability of societies, like we can use simulation, we can project the areas where we can have hotspot areas where we have the more pandemic situations, more COVID patients, right? Even based on the previous data, we can do simulations, distributed simulations, and then we project the areas which have the high hotspot areas, right? While keeping talking about my own areas, like we also have some kind of challenges, issues. Like if we talk about a city, so we have to model entire city. Some of the challenges could be like how we can simulate our large scale simulations. We need uh, systems, we need high performance systems, we need scalable solutions, we need scalable frameworks, right? Right. So these entire thing will help us to actually focus on particular problem. And right now we are working on this global pandemic, right? So the title is Global Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic and Technological Challenges, right? So next slide, please. So this is the, sorry. This is, I start usually with a quote. Can you move back one slide? This, the previous slide is actually the quote, right? So which I usually start with my lectures or my discussions based on some certain quotes. So this time I choose this. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, right? So if we talk about from research perspective, so it is very difficult to understand the problem, right? So when you understand the problem, it is very easy to come up with a solution, right? So most of the time you have to work hard to understand the problem and its impact, right? Because the impacts can be devastating, and if you can easily understand their offshoot of the impact or the entire impact of the problem, you can split the problem into a sub problem, and then you can solve these problems, or maybe you can come up with a one solution that can focus on all this thing, right? Like before the COVID, right? So UN is also working on the sustainable development goals. Most of us are already familiar that there are 17 goals around, which talk about the poverty, well-being, and education, right? So these goals are already been there from last decades or more than that, right? As far as I remember. But the thing is that during this COVID, can we see those SDG goals? Are they? Can we rate them? Can we analyze where we are standing at this point? Are we providing the quality education? Because we are working on this SDG goals, which is 4 SDG 4. So we have been working on this goal from last like maybe a decade or more than that. But still, in this COVID situation, we failed to provide the basic educations to our students. The reason is we do not have the infrastructure available. We do not have the network available. In those places where we have the network available, we do not have actually high-speed internet available. So there is distortion, there is disconnectivity, there is partial connectivity. So there's a lot of suffering I have seen in my own country, which is Pakistan, right? So the tribal areas, the areas which are near the border, we fail to provide them basic necessities, right? Apart from that, good health and well-being is also tested during this pandemic, right? But the thing is, it was the previous slide, right? Still on the code. So the is still tested, right? Good health and well-being is still under being stressed, right? So we are still suffering to provide the good health to our patients, right? So we have seen the hospitals have been fully occupied with the patients, and we are struggling to handle this pandemic, right? So the thing is, like, we need to understand this problem. If we understand this problem, we can focus on similar issues if they occur in the future, right? So without understanding the problem, we can simply putting this thing under the carpet, right? So the first thing is to understand the impact of your problem, and then you can go to the solution, right? So can you move to the next slide? So a couple of slides are actually based on the impact to give you the idea how devastating this COVID pandemic is, right? So we have heard about the Spanish flu, which was, I guess, in 1980. So we heard about from our parents or read from the books, right? But this is the first thing which which our generation have seen. This is pandemic. The people are staying at home. They are not moving out. They are actually not allowed to go outside. So if you see this global impact leading causes of death, so the heart diseases is 8.8 million so far. The stroke is 6.2 million and other pulmonary diseases 3.2 million. Apart from that, the COVID is actually leading and it is in the fourth place, right? And this is the data till March 2021. So 2.7 million people have been died so far because of this COVID pandemic. What was the reason? Because we were not fully prepared of that, right? In 2019, 55.4 million died across the globe, right? So this is actually the indicator to give us the impact of this pandemic. So how devastating this pandemic is actually, and how we can solve this, how we can prepare ourselves for the future causes of some similar situation, right? So technology is actually the one thing which can help us to prepare for this kind of the pandemic. And we also have issues and which we have identified during this pandemic, like interoperability, the communication gap, the medical data, transportation, and we have so many issues which are diagnosis in this during this pandemic. But still, technology is the one way to move forward to handle these kind of a pandemic in future. Right? Can you move forward, please? Okay, so this is a comparison of the death from the flu death, right? So if you see, the COVID deaths are more than the flu deaths. So in only US, this is the data actually for US only. In the US, the country with the highest number of COVID deaths, right? As we all know, right? So there were about 540,000 deaths because of this COVID pandemic. And apart from that, if you compare it with the flu death, there are only 368,000 so far death in the US alone. So right, you can see the impact of this pandemic, right? So many people have died. They have nothing to work on. They have to stay at home. So especially the people who are actually on daily wages, they have suffered a lot. Right? So the next, please. Okay, so this is the global impact days under the lockdown. So because of this pandemic, we have observed that the countries went under the complete lockdown. They completely shut down their businesses, their industries, their market, everything, right? Because this is the only way they can tackle this pandemic. Right? Apart from that, if we see the people who are on the daily wages, they have struggled a lot, right? Because they have to earn from bread for their family on daily wages, and if they do not have any work, so they have suffered a lot. I have personally seen the people who have actually stopped calling their mates at home because of this COVID pandemic, and this kind of a community which is actually below the average income, they have suffered a lot. Like if you see this chart there, yeah, the countries who are starting from 200 to 249 days a complete lockdown. Apart from the partial allowment where they allow one family member to actually go to for the grocery, and then we have a list of countries who have actually 250 to 300 days of complete lockdown, and then 300 to 366 days on lockdown. Still the COVID pandemic is still alive, right? So which means the countries are not actually on complete lockdown, but they are on spot lockdown. Like they have cities, they have districts which they have locked down because of their pandemic cases. But the good thing is that the life is coming back. We have prepared ourselves for this pandemic. Now we have the vaccines, and the vaccinated people can easily move around, right? Next slide, please. This is impact of the this is the impact of actually the financial on economical helps, right? So we can see that US is below -3.6. The euro areas is also -7.4. Apart from China, all the countries who have their exports or the import, they have struggled a lot, right? So this can tell us the impact what the common people have faced during this pandemic. So this is actually give us the idea about the entire region that they have struggled, right? So the China's growth is way above this thing, but they have reduced, they have shrunk to +2 only, right? And apart from that, all other countries and went below this zero, the negative rating, right? So they have their economies has been reduced devastatingly. And if you focus on if you see this thing and try to put focus on a layman who's actually daily wages or they have hardly earned for their families, so you can see the impact on that family as well, right? So most of the countries, they are underutilized, under-resourced countries. They have failed to announce some kind of packages for the people who are struggling, right? Yes, next please. Okay, so unemployment in 2020, sorry, 114 million people lost their jobs, according to the latest unemployment figures, right? So, and these figures are from the International Labour Organization, right? The previous slide, right? Yes. So we the previous slides. Yes, that unemployment. Thank you. And these figures are actually from the labor organization. But you can see these are the official figure. Apart from the official figure, the actual figures are way higher than this thing, right? Apart from this thing, many workers have fallen into the economic inactivities, which means their work has been reduced. They have to forced to work on a short period of time, or they have reduced their working hours to actually only to earn their daily wages, right? So the total number which is seen here is way higher than which is listed here, right? So next slide, please. Okay, so one thing we have seen is like apart from everything is shrinking because of pandemic, people are struggling. There are a few people, or you can say a few stakeholder, which have double their money almost, right? So if you see, they are the 10 richest people who got their money almost double in this pandemic, and this is the data which is issued by the Oxfam Internet, UK-based charity organization, right? So the perspective is to put this income inequality in perspective. A report by Swiss Bank USA found that the world's largest people got 3.9 trillion richest in by December 2020, right? The 10 largest billionaire made for 540 during this time. So most of us already know these people. Who are these people? Actually, they are somehow directly or indirectly associated with this technology, right? So we know Amazon owner, we know Bill Gates, we know Elon Musk, and we know Mukesh Ambani. So right. So they are the actually innovators. They are the innovators, or probably you can say which leader in the technology, right? So they took the advantage of this technology, is this pandemic, and they came up with this solutions. Like if you talk about the China, during this pandemic, we have seen so many people in China actually who got the billions or millions because they are associated with the health or healthcare, and they have came up with the certain things which are very helpful in the pandemic, like the PPEs, like the robots, like UAVs through scanning procedures, AI-based detection systems, right? So these kind of things tell us that the future is with the technology. If we want to serve our community, so we have to use the right things at the right time, right? So they only look for the options, right? So saying that these people use this actually pandemic as an opportunity to excel further, right? And the result is in front of us in this slide, right? Almost double their amount which they had before the pandemic, and then which they have at the end of the December 2020. This next slide, please. Okay, so schools, children are out. The schools and universities closure disrupted the education of more than around 1.7 million students from 188 countries have faced this education crisis. So most of the schools have put online. They have the online classes, the Zoom. They are using MS Team, and Google Classrooms are very common because of online classroom. But the thing is that do everyone has the smart gadgets? Do everyone has the internet access availability? So if we talk about if I talk about Pakistan particularly, so we do have in the main cities or the main areas. But if we talk about the border regions or the far-flung areas, so we have struggled to provide the internet connectivities or stable connectivities which can help them to actually connect and take the online education, right? So apart from that, the students are the one who has really suffered a lot, right? Because online education is not actually comparable with the offline face-to-face education, if I say, because the communication skills, the way the teacher interact with you, the questions you ask the teachers, the teacher know how their students behave and what are their weaknesses and what are their strengths. So these things are totally wiped out during this COVID pandemic. And these things, and here in this chart, there are some numbers which actually indicate that the percentage of students who went out of the school and they have the limited access to the technology. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is access to the online learning, right? So we have the people who can actually potentially reach. They have they have the instrument, they have the infrastructure available to actually engage ourselves for the online education, and then we have the numbers to actually the people who do not actually connect themselves to the online education, right? So because they might not have the infrastructure available, they might not have the smart gadgets available, or maybe they have more than one children in their homes and they have one gadget, so how to share the gadget. So there are a lot of problems which have been seen, and as I said that the only student is the one who has suffered a lot during this pandemic, and these numbers are clearly indicate that the suffering of our students. Next slide, please.
Dr. Asad, you
Yes.
have only 5 minutes more.
Oh, okay. So I'll try to be quick, right? So this is about the this impact of the air travel, right? So we can clearly see the trend lines, like how it's fall down in compared to the 2009, right? So next slide. And okay, so this is the Mecca, right? So we can see that how the Muslims were stopped to performing their pilgrimage in Mecca, right? So this is before and after picture, right? So this gives you the impact of how the devastating this pandemic is, and the bad thing is actually we were not aware of that and we were not ready for that. Apart from the SDG goal, we are not fully aware of this kind of pandemic actually can happen, right? So if you move on to the next slide, so as I mentioned, so in technology we have the innovator and the disruptor. Innovator and disruptor, concept of innovator and the disruptor, right? So a disruptor is a small number of those innovators that can actually disrupt the technology, right? Which means that they can come up with some kind of a technology which can bypass or surpass the existing technologies or the vendors, so they can actually totally shift the technology paradigm, right? So as I shared earlier, the technology, the people who got richer actually took benefit of this thing, and mostly from the China, right? Because they are well engaged with the healthcare, and during this pandemic, we have seen the large number of millionaires are coming from China. Next slide, please. Apart from that, we have also seen a clear increase in the technology adoption. If you see that almost 20% adoption have been seen in this during this pandemic, because the offices were online, were shifted online, the educations were shifted online. So most of the people who are not actually technology geek, they have started learning the technology. So there's a complete shift has been observed in entire part of this world, entire part of the world, right? So next slide, please. So technologies that can play a part. So it's an IT, AI, and blockchain, right? So we can integrate this thing to come up with some kind of a solution that can help during the pandemic, or not even pandemic. These technologies are very useful and very helpful. Like the IoTs are actually the sensors, right, which can provide us the data. Either it could be a pandemic data, or it could be any other data which we can use it to make some predictions or make certain decisions. Right? Blockchain can be seen as an alternative to the traditional databases. Right? The best thing is like it's a distributed in nature, distributed ledger, and the people cannot modify them. Right? So if we're storing some kind of a patient history, pandemic history, how where the places they have visited and how much time they have contracted with something, who has actually a victim of who has been a patient who has been suffered with the pandemic's virus. So these data cannot be altered. Right? So one thing is so we are providing us something we can take decision and help resuscitate our community, right? So similarly, in the recent past, the Facebook uses AI and big data and satellite imagery to actually to come up with the maps which can help us to identify the density of a population density, and based on that, they can define how to provide suppliers what kind of advertisement they have to send to them, right? So Facebook is already using this kind of technology, right? So when the opportunity comes in, they use the same technology to identify the pandemic patient, right? So they are the innovators. They already one step ahead of the others, right? So because of that, you can see that their the income has been doubled in this pandemic because they are already know about this technology. They are using technology in some forms, and then they only converted the technology to handle this pandemic situation. Right? Next slide, please.
Hah?
So this is next slide. So this is the architecture,
Yang
three-layer
India,
architecture of
Kristen kayak itu mah.
system which we propose
Siapa cowok siapa sih?
or any system that is actually based on end devices, right? Like crowdsourcing, or the end devices could be the IoT data, UAVs, or even smartphones. So the fog lens is actually a centralized layer, which we can say a district office, or we can also call a base station. If I try to map this on actual problem, right? The data is coming from the at the fog layer, and based on that, only the limited data is forwarded to the cloud layer, where they analyze the data, and based on that, they can take certain decisions. Right? So which means in pandemic situation, the data is which user have installed in their mobile phones, and the data is actually filtered out which kind of data need to be transported. Because if we forward the entire data to the cloud stations, it will actually chop the network. Right? So we also have
Nasi os. Yeah.
the network is not unlimited. The bandwidth is not unlimited. We have to utilize
Andi
the
tu mana
resources
mu?
in an efficient way. So the fog is actually the base stations, or you can say a district officer, which collect all the data from the user, and based on next please. Next slide. Yes, next slide. Yes, previous slide. Yes. So this is a content tracking app, right? Okay, so this is actually the previous is a three-layer architecture. If you put this three-layer architecture into a real perspective, so these are the hospitals, healthcare, and the situation. These are the sources where the where the data is generated, and data is actually received at the local health office, which is filtered out, and only the required data is forwarded to the disease control and prevention. Which organization. Next slide. Next slide, please. So this is contact tracking app. So I have seen a number of people based on that, some of the key technologies which is used actually the blockchain, GPS, and Bluetooth and GIS, right? So there are a number of applications and framework already exist which provide the blockchain and GIS, Bluetooth, and GPS capabilities and allow the devices to communicate with it. Right? So I always encourage my students. So if you are developing something like this, try to use the existing frameworks. Do not try to reinvent the wheel, because there is no usefulness in that, in reinventing the wheel. There are so many frameworks of blockchain available on the internet. There are so many modules that can allow the device-to-device communication. Try to adopt them, right? So like in this picture, there is a Bluetooth a mechanism of contract tracking through a Bluetooth, right? So when the devices come close to each other, they share their keys, and based on the keys, they can identify if someone has the COVID symptoms, and the other is informed or notified about the quarantine. Right? Next slide. Okay, so role of the blockchain, as I mentioned earlier, the role of blockchain is very important, and it can be seen as an alternative to the standard databases system. As the hospitals, universities, government, insurance companies, research institute all require the data about the particular employee or employee student, how this behavior, how it is behave in the society, right? So in most of the cases,